Hello and welcome to Todos Somos Marcos. I can't imagine trying to stay informed on important public issues without access to the tremendous resource of Pacifica Radio, KPFK 90.7 FM here in Southern California. And I'm very privileged this morning to have a chance to talk with one of KPFK's leading lights, Marc Cooper. Thanks a lot for taking the time, Marc.
My pleasure, Peter.
I've been listening to your show, Radio Nation, I'm sure since it's been on a couple of years, and I thought it was wonderful. And now you've taken Jerry Brown's daily 4 o'clock spot on Pacifica, on KPFK at least.
Right.
I used to think that Jerry Brown's show was just about the best thing on the radio, but since you've come on, I don't really miss him very much. You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you, Peter. It was something that I had talked about with the management of the radio station around the time last Thanksgiving, when it became clear that Jerry Brown was going to run for mayor of Oakland and was going to have to leave his show.
That's right.
It all happened a little bit more quickly than we anticipated, so we considered the show to still be in construction. We're still working on it.
Well, you're doing a great job. Now, I think that you get a different view of the world when you listen to Pacifica, read The Nation, which you're also associated with, and I think what you could call the alternative press. It's not that a lot of the stories, like just this morning, I heard you talking about the labor movement in France, and it was really a tremendous show. Very interesting developments, and something that I don't remember coming across in the LA Times.
Yeah, well, times have changed in journalism. Back, if you'll allow me just a little background on this, I'm not even sure that the word alternative journalism works anymore.
Yes.
Up until the 1950s or 60s, there was only one kind of journalism out there, which was the mainstream journalism that I guess is best symbolized by somebody like Walter Cronkite, who would come on and tell you the way the world was, and that's the way it was.
Uh-huh.
And then in the 1960s, a kind of new journalism was born. I mean, there were two labels. One was new journalism, which were journalists working in the mainstream, but that were taking a kind of innovative approach, getting closer to the characters in the stories they were reporting, getting more involved, more passionate, less confined by the traditions of traditional journalism. And then you had the birth with the movement of the 1960s of kind of alternative journalist sources, right? Underground press and things like that. But I think that the point that I would make is that really with the tabloidization of the commercial media now, really they've almost become the alternative journalists. They're the ones who are more interested in telling personal stories and soap operas and the personal views of the so-called reporters, which frequently aren't very good reporters, but are TV actors.
Even when they do a story, say, on problems in a Mexican village or in a sector, it will be very anecdotal, and it will be about a half a page before you can get to the traditional who, what, why, when, and where.
Yeah. Well, the notion is that the commercial media is driven by some conventional wisdom that people, that Americans, for one, are too stupid to follow real stories. That they're too stupid, or they're not interested enough, or they're too ignorant, or however you want to cut it. Their attention span isn't big enough, and that they can't handle, real news.
You don't go along with that?
Well, look, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy here.
Yes.
I think there is a problem in remembering our history, and there is a problem with maintaining a narrative, as we might say, and there is a problem with people's attention span. But that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, the media is kind of kaleidoscopic, and that fragments people's consciousness. And then the media says, well, people's consciousness are fragmented, so I guess we can't do anything except this kind of fragmented work. So I think that if you put good work out there, people will be attracted to it. It's hard to compete with the entertainment ethos, obviously. Right?
I want to give an example that bears that out. You did a show, it must have been a year or two ago, where you featured a talk by Elaine Bernard, Harvard professor.
Last summer.
She was talking, I think, in support of the striking Detroit Free Press workers.
That's right.
And I taped that show. I'm active in a union, IBW. I work for the Department of Water and Power. I have a lot to do with, the rank and file union people and the union leadership. A lot of them are not like flaming leftists.
No, of course not.
Some of them vote Republican, and some of them, I would say, tend to be somewhat conservative.
Sure.
But I thought that they would be interested in that tape, which I thought was tremendously radical in what she was proposing. And you know what? Nobody didn't like that. Everybody liked that tape that I gave it to.
Right.
So I think, to me, that indicates that people could handle it if they had the opportunity to get it, and would eat it up, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's two problems there. One is that there's a certain amount of news, what's passed off as news, that really is just entertainment. It's just entertainment. And it exists solely to build an audience that has been sold to advertisers. It's not, people don't understand, it's not products and commodities that are sold in advertising. It's audiences that are sold to the advertisers. So it's really we who are being sold when we are watching television or reading a newspaper, etc. But on top of that, when news is political, there is often a pattern, how would you say it, a mold that's imposed on the news that's very, very knee-jerk, that assumes that the country is split between liberals and conservatives. And that isn't really the case. Most Americans don't have a very defined political view.
That's true.
They consider themselves to be liberal on some issues, conservatives on others, and that's across the board. I think that in the case of what you said about Elaine Bernard, what it really tells us is that society isn't split between liberals and conservatives. It's split between the top and the bottom. It's split between elites and regular people.
Yeah, exactly.
And that the elites, no matter what their political point of view, whether they are, Ted Kennedy liberals or Newt Gingrich conservatives, they have much, much more in common with each other.
That's right.
Than they have differences. And common people, whether they call themselves liberals, conservatives, left-wingers, or right-wingers, they have much more in common with each other than they do with the elites above them.
Don't you think?
But I just wanted to say, but our media perpetuates a series of myths. I mean, we could spend 4 hours going down the myths, but one of the great myths, of course, that has pervaded American media, both in news and entertainment, is that America is basically a middle-class country where social class doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that isn't true.
No.
And the other myth that pervades our society is that somehow the free market economic system we have somehow equates democracy. That's not true either. No matter what one's opinion of it, is, but the ability to set up a business on the corner, or to go to a 7-Eleven and buy 38 types of toilet paper, doesn't inherently have anything to do with democracy.
No.
And those two concepts are often fused together in the public mind, where democracy is really a question of power. It's not a question of your right to choose a product. It's a question of how much power do you have as an individual in the society or along with other individuals. So that, in fact, I say all this because when you go to somebody who is essentially a conservative, like some of these fellow workers you have at the DWP, when you present them a logical presentation that addresses the real question of power in the workplace and power in the society, they can come up with some very radical notions that transcend their immediate kind of political ideology.
I think you're right. Now, as we speak, in mid-February, the it looks like the war machine is getting ready to engage in another of its periodic outrages and start a new bombing attack in Iran. Iraq, excuse me. And I think that what I would call the mainstream press is beating the drum quite effectively. I think that if more people listen to Pacifica Radio, and got the breadth of the analysis that's available there, that there would be a lot less support for that.
Well, yeah, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I just yet the mainstream press, the so-called mainstream press, in tight with the coalition, as you said, not a formal coalition, not a conspiracy, but people playing golf together and having business lunches together, and controlling the media, which is driven by the need to sell sell clients to advertisers, and it gives the party line. Now, Pacifica, I don't know. I never looked at the books, but I know they're hanging by the teeth. I heard you interviewing the publisher of The Nation about their $100,000 a year deficit. $500,000 a year. Do you ever feel that it's kind of frustrating to be sort of on the fringe?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that you raised several questions there that I'll take a whack at. First of all, in terms of the commercial media, they have a party line, as you call it. But, that party line reflects is really based on two pillars. One, of course, is the commercial structure of the media. But because it's the commercial structure, the media is interested in not offending anybody, right? Their job, in order to be profitable, is to build audiences, gather audiences around them, and not cleave or divide audiences, because it's bad for advertising. So that means that the natural instinct of the media isn't to take a party line. It's to reflect what it instinctually feels is the conventional wisdom of the society. And the reporters, the editors, the news managers, they're products of the same society. And in fact, I've worked in the commercial media quite a bit, and it is true what they say. Nobody ever sits down and says you can't say this or you. But that's that's like saying that when Mike Piazza steps up to the plate for the Dodgers, Bill Russell doesn't say to him, "Hey, Mike, try and hit a home run." He doesn't have to say that. That's why you pay Mike Piazza whatever it is, $6 or $7 million, because Mike Piazza knows that in order to get ahead as a Dodger, what it is he has to do. And that doesn't, in journalism, that doesn't mean that there's a code book where reporters know what it takes to get ahead or not get ahead, but they know, like in any bureaucracy, like in the Department of Water and Power, that you run a great risk if you go up against the conventional wisdom.
In case they forget, there's always examples like Gary Webb, like the guy that...
It's always safer to play by the established rules or by the established wisdom. So, in fact, I don't blame it just on the media. The media, to a great degree, reflects our political culture. It's symbiotic. It reflects it, and at the same time it shapes it, right? But, this is a political culture in which pacifists are looked at askew, and where the patriotism of an individual is immediately questioned if the country is about to go to war, and you question the assumptions of the government. So I think that's the first problem. In terms of does one feel marginal at Pacifica? Well, I'd say that's an interesting question. I'd say yes. At times, certainly yes. You look at whatever balance sheet you can look at. Budget, though Pacifica Radio is growing, but you look at Pacifica's budget, or you look
listenership.
At the listenership. You've got in a signal area of 20 million people, you've got 150,000 to 200,000 regular listeners. So it depends how you look at that.
Well, that's a pretty good chunk.
Yeah, I know that I'm quite interested because as a political reporter who's lived in Los Angeles most of my life, I know most of the key players. Sometimes that world seems very small.
Yeah.
Because you say, well, gee, I can look in my Rolodex, and I can see these 100 key players. But for example, when I'm on the air at KPFK and we're doing fundraising, and you see the pledges come in from, communities 75 miles away or 100 miles away from the transmitter, when you see pledges coming in from Bakersfield and from Laguna Hills and from San Diego and San Bernardino, not to mention, of course, the whole Los Angeles metropolitan area, you say, well, gosh, out there really are all kinds of people who are scattered out there who want to have a different view of things, who
Yes.
do want to be engaged, but it's very difficult for them to get engaged and get involved. There aren't many places, there aren't many channels, and your neighbors think you're crazy if you
That's
do it.
right. Well, if Pacifica is slightly on the margin, what we're doing with Todos Somos Marcos on public access, or my
Pacifica's like
zine
the
that I
networks
put out,
compared to you. Yeah.
it really is. And, to tell you the truth, I often wonder if, really the considerable effort that I put into my free and freelance news projects is worthwhile.
Well-
But you get a couple readers here, a couple viewers here, and it keeps you going.
Well, I reconciled that a long time ago. I think that what you have to think is that there's a danger in doing that kind of work, because the danger is if one becomes messianic about it and believes that it is now one's mission
Yeah.
to lead the
Yeah.
blind into illumination. That can not only be wrong and dangerous, it can also be very frustrating.
Sure.
Because it doesn't happen that way.
No.
People take consciousness or acquired consciousness on their own timetables. But what I do think, to answer you, is that it doesn't matter, you see, because it's the right thing to do. So it's not just a question of self-realization, but it is the moral thing to do, and it is the right thing to do, and somebody has to do it.
Actually, self-realization is not negligible, though.
No.
One gets a lot of satisfaction, and I sort of envision, as more media is available to people without, big business behind it, that people can grow more to being their own media, at least to a certain extent, at least to fill a certain niche.
Yeah, these are difficult issues that, I enjoy talking about with people like yourself, because I actually have a mixed vision of it. I think that as more kind of readily available media becomes available, there is some potential there, though I'm not sure how readily available it is.
Yeah, sure.
I, for one, am very skeptical about all the internet stuff. I don't think that there's much there, and I don't think much of it is really very free. Number one. Number two, there's also the problem of media itself. And sometimes those of us who are in the alternative media have a tendency to fall victim to misconceptions created by the media. And let me give you an example. The media is so pervasive in our society. It is so present everywhere. And it is such an emotionally charged arena that I think we sometimes run the danger of believing that it is the media is the key to social consciousness. And I don't believe that. I believe that the media does have an effect on what people think, of course. What people see, what people read, what people look at in the movies, magazines, television, primarily, of course, has an influence on what they think and how they see the world. But social change doesn't come through the media.
No.
And it doesn't come through better media. And there's the old expression that comes, I think, from the 1930s, which it might be a little naive, but it says, if you don't like the news, go out and make better news.
Mark, I downloaded this piece about you from the KPFK website.
It's actually from the Nation website.
From the Nation website. And it says, Marc Cooper's career in journalism began in 1966 when he founded and edited an underground newspaper in high school in Los Angeles. What high school?
Fairfax High School.
Fairfax High. I went to L.A. I was right on the border.
The L.A. Romans. Yeah. Yeah.
I was in the class of 65.
Yeah, a couple years before me. Yeah. We started an underground newspaper there in 66. I think I was in the 10th grade. It started because one of my friends wrote a piece, wanted to publish a piece in the student newspaper that was critical of an ROTC training program on campus that was being substituted for physical education. And was this, of course, was the time of the war in Vietnam.
Yes, when it was just beginning.
Right. So we couldn't get that in the school newspaper. So we put out our own paper, and got me thrown out of school a couple of times.
Don't you think there's a kind of a charm, if not a power, in the underground press, that people are just putting it out by themselves?
Yeah, I think there's a charm in the underground press, and I think that we often forget, because of the influx of celebrity journalism into even commercial journalism, what power the written word really has. Bureaucrats, the powerful, the guilty, the comfortable, are all turned very uncomfortable by the truth when it's put on paper, especially on paper. People say, well, no, the electronic media is much stronger. Electronic media has much greater immediate penetration, but it comes and goes. The real danger for the guilty is the written word, because that stays on the page.
That's a very good point.
It creates a record.
Yeah.
So what's amazed me since I was 16 years old or 15 years old in 1966 right up to today is whether it was dealing with the administration at Fairfax High School, or a state bureaucracy, or a federal bureaucracy, or a federal government program, or a local smog agency, or whatever it is. It's amazing to see how frightened to death the powerful are when their misdeeds are put before them in print.
Well, we certainly just had an example of that when you did an article on co-producer Bruce Sloman's whistleblowing for the AQMD.
Yeah.
Great story.
Yeah, thank you.
Really glad to see that out. A lot of people have told me when I try to call their attention to a massacre in Chiapas or some event like that, we don't want to hear about that depressing stuff. There's bad stuff going on all the time, and and even I think the ones that don't say it, a lot of them share that view. And to a certain extent, I'm sympathetic to that.
Yeah.
If there's nothing we can do about this, what is it really? Are we really helping ourselves to pay attention? Should we pay attention?
It's a really deeply disturbing question that you ask. I actually teach a university course based just on that question. And I say it's very, very complicated. Those like you who get involved in these issues, you feel the moral urgency to communicate this to others, and that's authentic, and it's real, and it's valid. Sometimes the response that you get, which is, don't tell me about stuff I can't do, sounds indifferent. And sometimes it is indifferent. But sometimes that's authentic. And one should be compassionate with that point of view, because it's not that person's fault. We live in a culture that is new in human history. It's only been in the last century in some form or another since the invention of electronic journalism through the Morse code and through telegraphy up through telegraphy to radio and then to television and now to satellite television. It's only been in the last century where you could actually move news instantaneously by electronic means. And that meant up till a century ago, people had to deal more directly with things that they could really have an influence on. And now, in a way, it's a valid question. I mean, I don't think that it's that we should have a knee-jerk answer. If somebody in Pomona or Claremont says, well, okay, there's the killing of these Indians in Chiapas, what do you want me to do about it, right? It's a tough question for you to come. I mean, if you move them and they come back to you and say, well, okay, you got my attention, now what am I supposed to do? That's hard. I mean, you can give them a list of things to do, right?
Yeah.
They can write letters, they can join up a demonstration, but the fact is one could say, well, those things are valid and they should do them. That isn't really the same as capital D doing something about it.
It really isn't.
there is this kind of inverse ratio to information to empowerment. And in a sense, the more quote unquote information really isn't information. Well, it is information, but it isn't knowledge. That's the point I want to make. The more kind of smorgasbord and smattering of information that's out there, in some ways, the less empowered we are, and the less the ratio of impotence rises, because you do turn on the television. You say, well, okay, there's this in Bosnia, and this has always been the case in human history. There's always been lots of big problems everywhere, right? The problem is when they're all brought into your living room in 30-second capsules, it does create a feeling that you're powerless, that this is inevitable, that there's nothing you can do about it. That isn't true, but the feeling is certainly a real one.
Marc, we're out of time. We could go on. Thanks a lot for
Thank you,
taking the
Peter.
time to
Thank
talk.
you.